and we should probably talk about the most important thing, which obviously everyone is so excited about, and nobody can wait for it in the Club World Cup. Can you tell I'm being sarcastic?
This is the weird thing right now. Is like I'm trying to gauge how people feel about the Club World Cup. Um, I don't know I know obviously like there is a cynical take of all this, and I think there is some validity to it. Not like talking down Chelsea. It's more like just the general feel of this tournament from like a promotional point of view, from
Mhm.
Infantino going on streams and trying to get Ronaldo a transfer to the tournament, and the way I think it was Inter Miami have made their way into the tournament clearly because they have a certain player, and that's the only reason they're in this tournament. Let's just be blunt about it, and probably
Yeah.
also because it's in America. There's a lot of branding opportunities, blah 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 blah. So it doesn't feel like the height of sporting kind of integrity. Let's be honest, but we're talking about football here at this point. So I don't know where do you sit with this, because I do think there is some excitement from a purely Chelsea perspective, squad perspective, that I have
Mhm.
about this.
Um, I mean, let's just look at the group straight away. LAFC, Flamengo, and Tunis. I'm just like, yeah, okay, cool. LAFC have replaced Club Leon because I think it was a multi-club model or something that basically they couldn't get in. So already there's a questionable selection in terms of teams coming in there and why they're there. Um, I look at it and I think, yeah, I guess from a squad perspective, I would be excited, but I mean, the only thing I'd be really interested to see is Mike Penders. I think the rest of the squad's pretty self-explanatory. Um, I don't look at it and think there's going to be a massive escalation in terms of excitement. It's more questions I have. Christopher Nkunku included in the squad. Why you're trying to shift him on? Renato Vega was obviously extremely disenfranchised when apparently there was no bomb squad, and there is very clearly a bomb squad that's been left at Stamford Bridge. Renato Vega's included in that. He thought he'd be, playing for Chelsea again, but obviously, what happened in January in terms of him wanting to play centre back and left back, etc., etc. Um, Something again he is now very disenfranchised with. Um, I'm kind of just intrigued more than anything. Obviously, the transfer window opens up again whilst these games are going on. So, should Chelsea progress, which realistically I kind of expect them to do so, um, I'd like to think that for those knockout stages, we're going to see some really exciting players potentially wearing a Chelsea shirt and players which we can look forward to. Obviously, Esteval's someone I'm excited to see as well. I know I've kind of downplayed it a lot. Um, But realistically, look, I don't think this is the height of sporting prowess. I don't look at this and I think it does feel again a bit like it's the World Cup. It's the World Cup at clubs. It is the Club World Cup. That is probably the most Alan Partridge thing I've ever said. It's so blatantly obvious. But it's
It's
literally a
not.
case
It's
of
not even that, is it? Because it doesn't have, for all we can quibble about, like the never-ending expansion of the World Cup. The World Cup is still huge. Like it is to many people, it is still the biggest football event, arguably sporting event, um, when it comes around. And obviously, with it being international, there's a lot of pride that comes with that. There's a lot of interest that comes with that. There's a lot of emotion that comes with that. And although I am a firmly club over country person, as I'm sure a lot of people are, um, this to me just kind of feels like a glorified kind of amped up preseason. And that's from a Enzo Maresca point of view, is how I'm looking at it, and kind of wanting to see, because really, because this is going to impact the actual kind of official preseason, which is going to be very short naturally, and it kind of has to be. He kind of, I think, has to use it, or probably will be looking to use it as a way to experiment, and I don't blame him for that. I've spoken to you, the name you haven't mentioned yet, which I find a little bit weird, because the name that I think that excites most people is Andre Santos. That's the name that I think Above and Beyond is probably the one that is the biggest unknown, not in a bad way. Like I just think in terms of how he looks, because it's not a, compared to say, we just spoke about Kendry Paez, or Esteban. Obviously, he's not at Chelsea. He will be at Palmeiras, but we get to watch him in this tournament before he joins Chelsea. But because he's had such an amazing loan spell, and because he has, very sufficient European football experience, and because he's made it pretty clear he wants to achieve at Chelsea, and I think is ambitious enough that he's going to compete seriously in this first team squad. The whole look of central midfield, which I think was dying out for more options because it was just basically running Caicedo and Enzo into the ground for most of last season. That excites me, and kind of the dynamic of Andre Santos as a presence in midfield for Chelsea and what it could do for the whole of the team. That does excite me. And because Chelsea are going to be heavily weighted favourites in the first few games, I think the first few games will feel the most pre-season out of any of them. Once you get to the knockout rounds, I know CFC Daily is kind of the expert at doing all the potential repercussions and the potential opponents we could face, because I think there is a scenario of us facing like PSG in the first knockout round, and it will get pretty much blockbuster ties post the first few group games. But in the first three games, I have no issues resting Cucurella, resting Caicedo, resting Enzo Fernandez. You put in Mamadou Sarr, you put in Andre Santos, you put in Dario Sugo, you start Liam Delap. You do all the things to give the team a new look, to rest the players that have just come off a really grueling season, but to give the new look to those players that we haven't seen before. I would like to see that in the opening few games. And I think that would give to most people who are maybe a little bit like shrugging their shoulders about the tournament a little bit more intrigue, right? Because my big fear, and it probably is one shared by most people, is the collateral damage that this tournament is going to have on our season, on player fatigue and injury. That's not just a Chelsea problem. That's an every team in this competition problem. And that's a wide scale football problem that deserves its own separate podcast that's not just Chelsea based. But that is the big concern. So yeah, it's a 50 at the moment. Like in my optimistic view, it's a 50-50 split between being excited to see these new players, but then also the concern of the collateral damage.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly where I'm at. I think those first few games. When I said it's literally like the club, like the World Cup. Obviously, when that comparison is in the group stage, there's two or three games, or two out of three games you don't really care about. It's very much a case of okay, this is fun. We're playing Algeria. Like okay, great. Like there's a couple of players there we know, but we should go through them. Or like when we played Tunisia in that opening game of the 2018 World Cup, it was like, okay, cool. We beaten Tunisia, fantastic. Um, it's very much a case of that's how I look at these group stages, and I think that's where the expense will happen. And if CFC Daily is saying we're going to play PSG in the potentially the first knockout round, I think we'll have a longer pre-season somehow. But aside from that, I do think that to give credit to the tournament, right? Because it's going to be every 4 years. I do think that if you look at the Conference League as an example, where it was a tournament where no one really gave it any prestige, it wasn't really something people cared about. To a certain extent, that is still true. But then also, I think when you're in it to win it. And I think you care about it more then. And I think you appreciate it more then. And I think Spurs definitely felt that way, despite the fact they had to pull out of it. I think we felt that way. West Ham felt that way. Aston Villa felt that way. Like, it's now gaining more credibility and cadence in the football conversation, right? And I do think that the Club World Cup will do that. I just think it's going to take a few tournaments to do so. And also not using speed as your main ambassador. I'm not going to lie, but it's probably something I would consider, because I think that's where people like you or I, maybe, despite being in that younger bracket of audience, are now feeling increasingly disenfranchised with it, because it's very much a case of, but we're here for the football. We're not here for, someone who, if we're being brutally honest, knows absolutely nothing about football, can't even call tournaments or players by their right names, but has 40 million in an audience. So they're just going to use that to try and make it more, take it to get
Mm.
to be, more of a serious opportunity. And then they're going to use his stream to try and say, oh, we're going to try and get Ronaldo moved to a team in the Club World Cup. It's like, why? Like it then just makes it look like WWE to me. It just makes it look scripted and
Mm.
horrible. And I know you love WWE. I know that's your thing, right? But I'm very much there. Like I'm here for what football is, and I think that's what a lot of
Mm.
people are there for. And I enjoy the short models of the Club World Cup. I think it's in the 10 days, condensed, in, out, sorted, fantastic. And I think you see similar situations as well with Manchester City, and Pep's been very honest about that. I think he's going to experiment as well. He said it's basically pre-season. Families going
Well, it
out,
kind of
ascending
it
Palm
has to be,
Beach.
right? It has to be.
Yeah,
Like that's I think that's what it is. I don't think, and to be honest, like if Chelsea win it, amazing, right? And we'll celebrate it, and it's great. We'll have the badge, and I'm sure many people will want to get the badge on the front of their shirt, and there'll be a lot of yeah, just joy, right? Like we would have won a trophy, but I can't seriously sit here and say if, for instance, the first time we play a PSG, right? If let's just say that scenario plays out where we faced them and then we get beaten, in some ways there'll be a bit of relief because I'm like, well, now these players can rest a bit,
yeah,
and we can start to get to the serious stuff. The serious stuff is the Premier League and the Champions League and the season. That will be my kind of feeling about it, and you've had enough games that hopefully gives a level of fitness. Like if I'm thinking about it from a coaching point of view, maybe you're like, well, these players are going to go off on holiday, but at least they've had a level of fitness to keep them going over the off season
yeah,
effectively that they wouldn't have on most years. I mean, I hope that isn't. My fear is I'd prefer them to just have all the rest rather than having to go out to play this tournament. Um, but I agree with you on like the Conference League sort of like the comparison, right? That yeah, it probably will take a few tournaments and how it looks, how it plays. I mean, the timings from a kickoff point of view are actually pretty favorable. From like, I know I'm very selfish here from like a UK perspective. I think
yeah. I'm looking
Chelsea,
at it now.
it in the tournament, I think Chelsea only have one game that's past 12 o'clock. I think
2 o'clock in the
all of the
morning
other
is when it
games
is.
Chelsea, yeah, all of the other games Chelsea are playing are at the least I think 8 o'clock, right? 7, 8, or 9. That's acceptable for a competition that's playing in America. And I'm sure they've sort of figured it out that the biggest football markets, I assume, will be have that favorable time because they want obviously a big audience. If I've got to be blunt right here, I don't know if I'm going to be fully awake for that final that final league game. I've got to say the final group
Do
game.
you want me to be very honest? I'm not going to be awake at all. I'm probably
Well,
going to
that's
be
the
in
thing.
bed.
I'll probably be in bed and I'll wake up and I'll watch it when I wake up like that. And I think a lot of fans will probably have that. And I listen, I have so much sympathy, and it's just a side tangent. But when I went to Australia a couple of years ago,
Oh yeah,
you have a new appreciation for how fans who live in that part of the world have to deal with our schedule because it bled into the start of the Pochettino season. So you get to appreciate that 3 o'clock games are kicking off and it's past 12 o'clock at night, and that's literally like that's not even accounting for like your 4 or 5 o'clock UK games. So I appreciate that, but yeah, I just hope that the players come through unscathed. Um, I think once you get to the knockout rounds, if Chelsea get past like the first knockout round, you kind of then want to win it.
yeah,
We've come this way, but listen, the quality of the teams are pretty serious.
yeah,
Bayern Munich, Manchester City, Real Madrid, PSG. You're talking about, and I think that's how the tournament's going to go, right? I don't think many people will expect anything other than probably a very European dominant end to this tournament.
yeah,
I'd be quite shocked if it isn't, unless we go with our very cynical take that the European clubs are not going to take it that seriously, and a few of them are going to get knocked out pretty early and get caught on a bad day. But I think we suspect that if I'd give you a winner right now, Real Madrid would probably win it because Real Madrid win everything. That's kind of my only shout for who I think will probably win it because
yeah,
they're a bit inevitable.
yeah. They're the Thanos of football.
Yeah.
It's very much a case of like, yeah, I think it'll probably be Real Madrid, but obviously you and I'll be covering it, as will the score on the final score show, doing all of the games. Uh, we're going to talk to him about the Tunis game. Because I think he said he wants to cover it, and I'm like, if you do, fair enough, but I'm
Yeah,
not helping you.
yeah, fair enough to any of the UK based creators who are covering that game. If you're not out
Yeah,
there, fair play. If you're out there, obviously, like fair enough. But if you're not
yeah.
out there and you're staying up till like 4 a.m.,
It's like
that's what I'm just
it's
saying.
like I was speaking to a few of the
Good
lads the
luck,
other
brother.
day. They all just went no. Like if we're there, fine. If we're not, like if we're up for it on the day, we'll probably do it, but we'll think about it. It's not like we're going to be all over it. I'm like, okay, fair enough. Um, but yeah, I think it's gonna be very interesting. This sort of like we'll see what's happening with it. Before we go, we should probably talk a little bit about the squad list because I know you're very excited about that. I know we mentioned some things in brief in passing. Obviously, there are players that aren't going. George Petrovic being a big one. Renato Vega, I think, is probably up there as well. Obviously, Chelsea talking about signing a left back slash centre back. Already got one we signed last year, who's pretty good, but fair enough. Um, how do you feel about this squad? You've mentioned that you're excited to see sort of Andre Santos, and obviously we're excited to see Esteban Willian in a Palmeiras shirt. Um, is there anyone else that really sticks out to you that is maybe less obvious? We could talk about Liam Delap all day, obviously, but we're not going to because we've already spoken about how excited we are to see him at
Mm.
Chelsea. Is there anything you're excited to see that could be done differently by Enzo Maresca?
I'm not entirely sure if like tactically there'll be anything wildly different. The one thing I am slightly excited for is I think it's been slightly overlooked the lack of depth of wingers now in the squad. When natural wingers, I'm talking about, not players that could be sort of like thrown in there in emergency. There's no Mudryk. Sancho's been sent back to Man United, so you've got Pedro Neto, Noni Madueke, and Tyreek George. And I think this is a potentially big opportunity for Tyreek George to get substantial minutes because we know that Enzo Maresca likes to use natural wide players. It's why in the market we're targeting Jamie Gittins. It's why we look at natural wide players. And because Tyreek George was kind of used as an emergency centre forward, but when you look at the centre forward options, we pretty well stacked there for this tournament. Even if one of them goes down with an injury, you've got Liam Delap, Nicholas Jackson, Mark Guiu, Christopher Nkunku, even Cole Palmer can play there. So I think Tyreek George will play more of a natural winger role in this squad. That's why I'm intrigued for. I think hopefully he can it's a great opportunity for him to kind of establish himself and make himself more than what he was last season. So hopefully he'll take that opportunity if he gets to start. Romeo Lavia, I think, can hopefully get some decent minutes. And as I said earlier, like the new players, Asugo, to see how he impacts the midfield, what he looks like. Can he be a good alternative to give a rest to Moises Caicedo across the course of the season as kind of a defensive holding midfielder? Andre Santos and Enzo Fernandez, how they work as kind of eights attacking midfielders. Josh Achimpom, I'd love to see him play substantial minutes as well. Gusto had to both Malo Gusto and Reece James played international minutes. So I think Josh Achimpom hopefully can gain some minutes there. And to see, like, there are some people who've watched Mamadou Sarr pretty consistently who big him up, who think, he is maybe going to surprise us in terms of his quality. And my hope
Mm,
is that Mamadou Sarr will prove to be. I haven't watched him at Chelsea, so I can't for certain say. But I'd like to think he's going to improve our options. And you may be sat there in a few weeks' time actually going, is it the end of the world if we don't sign a new centre back? That's a dream scenario, obviously. Like that, I'm not
yeah,
saying that's going to happen, but at the very least, he strengthens the options. So I'd say those are the couple of things. As I know with Chelsea, as I know with football, like all the things I'm theorising, barely any of them happen. And Enzo Maresca plays basically the players he's played all season.
yeah.
The only other side point I want to make is I wonder if during the course of this tournament, Christopher Nkunku will move from one Club World Cup team to another. I know by the rules he can't play for that other Club World Cup team, but because there's a Bayern Munich, for instance, are in this tournament as well, I wonder if during the course of this tournament, Christopher Nkunku will be back in his bags from the Chelsea camp and moving over to another probably lush hotel, 5-star hotel in America. Um, because I can't see his Chelsea future being that long. Like I think we're on limited time with Nkunku, which makes his inclusion and the lack of inclusion of Petrovic seem bizarre. That's why I think a lot of
Yeah,
people are confused about it, because unless we're about to see a 180 that none of us expect on his Chelsea career, and listen, it can happen. Like Marco Correa a couple of years ago was persona non grata at Chelsea Football Club and is now one of the most valued players in the first team squad. So I'm not. Cucurella is the great example of you don't write off players, but I would be really. It's not a case of a player playing consistently and just not playing that well. Nkunku is more than that. He's a player that feels like a bit of an outcast, really, in the current squad.
yeah. Yeah, no, exactly, exactly. And I think Nkunku, yeah, I could see that move happening to Bayern Munich, especially. I saw the links with Arsenal as well, and I'm really hoping that doesn't happen, to be honest. But Nkunku moving mid tournament, I could see. Obviously, Chelsea will have some incomings as well. Dan and I will be covering that, obviously, throughout the Club World Cup. And also, we would like to say as well, if you want to see some Club World Cup previews that aren't just Chelsea related, make sure you head across to the guys at Hooligan Soccer, because they are friends of ours who have been doing a fantastic coverage of the Club World Cup in the mix zones, talking to all the players. So make sure you head across to there. But that has been the Chelsea Echoes preview and transfer roundup for the Club World Cup. If you have enjoyed it and you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure you give us a like and obviously make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this or watching it on Spotify, make sure you give us a 5-star review and make sure you follow the feed. And if you just listen to it on other platforms, well, do the same. 5-star review and give us a follow. But I've been Louis,
I've been Dan.
and this has been the Chelsea Echo. We'll see you later.